and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I'm here today to do a Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and talk about any exciting bookish things that have gone on in the world. And just like last Friday, I'm actually going to be talking about exciting things that are to come in the bookish world. So if you want to jump to the Friday Reads portion of the video, there will be a timestamp in the description box. I finished 2 books this week and have some other things on the go, and I'll talk about what I might be doing next. What you will miss is discussion about what might win the National Book Award for fiction, which is going to be announced on Wednesday, not Thursday, Wednesday, November 19th. So I'll talk about that. First things to mention, today's shirt, I'm wearing a t-shirt that I got at Auntie's bookstore in Spokane while Joel and I were there recently. I love Auntie's. It's a huge bookstore and it's just fun to visit anytime we are in Spokane. So when I saw that they had a t-shirt, I really just had to get it. The other thing to mention before we start talking about the National Book Award is a thank you. And I think I know who did this one. I believe it was Amy. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me. But I got 2 books that came from my bookshop.org wish list, so I wanted to say thank you to Amy. And again, if I got that wrong, please let me know. The books are Refuge by Dot Jackson. This is a book that had been recommended to me possibly by Amy, but I think a couple of people have actually recommended it to me, and I hadn't gotten a copy for myself. You'll hear more about it in my book haul later this month. And the other one I'm also really excited about, I heard about this book from Ann Patchett a while ago. It's Our Spoons Came from Woolworths by Barbara Comins, and I can't wait to read this. I'm so excited to have it. So there you go. Just wanted to mention that because I just a lot of gratitude for that. And the other thing, Teddy is not here today, or at the moment that I'm filming this. He's off on an adventure with Joel and having a lot of fun. So he has a little bit of separation anxiety. He comes by it honestly. I mean, he had been abandoned before we got him, and we know nothing of his former life as a result of that. So he doesn't always do well if you're kind of ignoring him during the workday, or if he can't. What I've realized is he just wants to sit with you. It's not that he really wants your attention. It's that he wants to be able to sit with you. So he gets kind of wound up, and then I end up working on the couch with him, which is not great for my back. So I had this idea. I moved the chair that is usually back here by the Supposedly Fun library sign up here so it sits next to me, and put a pillow and a blanket down, and he is seeming to love this arrangement. The thing is, it feels kind of weird to just have a chair right here. It fits much better back there. So, but in the meantime, it seems like a great fit. And, you know, while I'm working on my laptop, I can just reach a hand out and pet him while he sleeps or anything like that. So that is just a quick explanation of the new setup. Will it be permanent? I don't know, but it's great to have him right here. Okay, let's move to the National Book Award. I am mostly going to be talking about the fiction category and the finalists for that as I make my prediction. But since I have been tracking the long list and the finalists for the translated literature category, I do want to quickly mention a prediction for that category as well. It's hard for me to predict the translated literature category because, well, for a lot of reasons. But actually, I just got one of those books that are on the finalist list from the library. And actually, I just got one of the books that's on the finalists for the fiction category from the library. But so I have We Are Green and Trembling by Gabriela Cabezon Camara from the library. The translated name is covered by the library sticker. It's translated from the Spanish by Robin Myers. So obviously, since I have this book, the sun just came out and is shining right on me, but we're going to keep going. Since I have this from the library, you can guess I'm really interested in reading it. So part of me would be happy to see it win, but I haven't read it yet. So it would just be interesting if it does. I think Sad Tiger by Seigi Negi Sino, translated by Natasha Lehrer, is probably the book that's going to win. I've heard phenomenal feedback about that book, even though everyone who has read it has told me that it is pretty emotionally brutal and a little bit devastating, but a very good read. So I am just going to say that I think Sad Tiger is the book that is ultimately going to win the translated literature category. Let's now pivot into fiction. So the finalists are, here's the one that I just got from the library, The True Story of Raja the Gullible and His Mother by Rabi Alameddine. Then there is Palaver by Brian Washington, A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar, The Antidote by Karen Russell, and North Sun or The Voyage of the Whale Ship Esther by Ethan Rutherford. Running through them all, I still feel surprised that Flashlight by Susan Choi didn't make it onto the list of finalists. If it was there, I would almost undoubtedly be predicting it to win, but it didn't make the long jump from the long list to the finalists. So here we are. And I do think a case could be made for each of these books. And the National Book Award certainly went through a phase where it liked to be a little bit quirky. So we could end up with a, surprise winner like North Sun or The Voyage of the Whale Ship Esther. Something that I think a lot of people, myself included, had not heard of when they announced the long list. But they haven't been as quirky as they were over the last few years. So I think the list of finalists is as far as North Sun is going to go. And I think Brian Washington and Palaver, he's an author who his name has been growing over the last few years. So I think you could make a convincing argument that he might end up winning. I think they are more likely to focus on the other, like the remaining 3 books, including The True Story of Raja the Gullible, Antidote, and A Guardian and a Thief. And while I think The Antidote could be a surprise winner in this category, I'm going to put it to the side for now. And that leaves me with The True Story of Raja the Gullible and His Mother by Rabi Alameddine and A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. And I do feel that The True Story of Raja the Gullible by Rabi Alameddine is a book that the National Book Award or the National Book Foundation would gravitate toward, although there is a jury for this and it changes every year. But I don't know. I'm sort of torn between both A Guardian and a Thief and The True Story of Raja the Gullible. This does feel like a book that the National Book Foundation would get behind. Clearly, they have by including it on the long list and among the finalists. I still feel that A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar is the book to beat since Flashlight didn't make it onto the shortlist. They don't call it a shortlist, which is why I keep saying finalists, but it's a little more awkward in conversation to keep saying finalists instead of shortlist. I don't know why. So I think A Guardian and a Thief is the book that is going to emerge victorious on Wednesday night. We'll see how that turns out. And like I said, I really won't be surprised if any of the 5 end up winning. But I think A Guardian and a Thief is the sort of breakaway from that grouping. It has been adored by critics. It seems like people who have commented on my channel and other reviews that I've seen, people have really enjoyed A Guardian and a Thief. So it also hasn't had any other major, like it wasn't up for the Booker Prize, so this would be a chance for the National Book Award to recognize something unique. I just feel like the most likely outcome is that A Guardian and a Thief will end up winning. But I really won't be surprised if we end up with The True Story of Raja the Gullible or The Antidote or even Palaver by Brian Washington. I think the most surprising outcome for me would be North Sun becoming the winner on Wednesday, but who knows? The National Book Award can be a little quirky. And that is one of the things that makes it fun. So that's my prediction for the National Book Award for Fiction. Quick note, the ceremony is on Wednesday. It is in the evening. I will be watching live. I'll put the link to register for the ceremony down below. And I'll be watching if I can. Joel will be home, but I'm sure he won't object to watching that for a little bit. And the difficulty will be that because it is in the evening where I live, I am not sure I will manage to film a video on Friday night. It's more likely that I will be able to film it Thursday morning before work and then get it to upload on Thursday. That's the most likely scenario. If I can film a video Friday night, I will. But again, the most likely scenario, that what I'm leaning into the more I think about it, because it's just going to be the easiest thing, is just to film Thursday morning. And you'll get my reaction to the winner on Thursday. Just a heads up about when you'll see my reaction video to the winner. I have also already filmed my November book haul revisit, and it's ready to upload. So once I finish filming this and get it uploading, I can schedule my November book haul revisit for Monday. So that is when you will be getting my November book haul revisit, and most likely my reaction to the winner of the National Book Award for Fiction. The cloud finally came back. It's still kind of there, but all right, let's move into the Friday Reads portion of this video. As I mentioned, I finished 2 books this week. I have one other book on the go, but I have barely started it yet, and I finished my print book this morning. So I know what I want my next book to be, but I haven't actually started it yet. So the first book that I finished this week was Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. I had read this when I was a teenager because the film adaptation, I believe, came out in 1995. And I saw it when it came to VHS. And for whatever reason, my family and I, we just really liked the movie, although it does have some dark subject matter. Like, check the trigger warnings, because it could be something that would be very difficult for you to read. It does involve sexual abuse and physical abuse and emotional abuse. So, if those are hard topics for you, Dolores Claiborne might not be the movie, might not be the book for you. But, so because we liked the movie, I read the book back then. So this is actually the first time I have reread it. And this time I did it on audio. Frances Sternhagen reads the audio, and she does a very good job. Part of me still, I mentioned this last week, but part of me still feels like it should be Kathy Bates, because Stephen King wrote Dolores Claiborne thinking about Kathy Bates for a film adaptation, because he was so impressed with what she had done for Misery, which she won an Oscar for. And she did star in the film adaptation of Dolores Claiborne. And so I feel like she would have been a more natural choice. I think she would have done a great job. But if you can't have Kathy Bates, Frances Sternhagen does a very good job, especially since the way Dolores Claiborne is written is that it's all from the voice of Dolores Claiborne herself. She has gone into the police station. She is going to make a statement about the death of her husband and the death of her employer, Vera Donovan. She has been accused of the murder of Vera Donovan, and she wants to set the record straight. So what you get is entirely her dialogue telling you about what has happened, and occasionally, especially in the beginning, interacting with the 2 police officers who are in the room with her and the woman who is taking the transcription of the of what her statement, what she is saying. And in the beginning, there's a lot of back and forth between them. Like, apparently the sheriff will be saying to her, would you please just get to the point? And she's like, all right, hold your horses. If I'm going to tell this story, I'm going to do it right. So once you let her, she gets more into the flow of the story, it does move a little bit better without that sort of constant interruption of her also like starting the story and then talking to the other three people in the room. And also in my last Friday reads, I mentioned that there is a long section of the book where Dolores is talking about working for Vera Donovan when she had become an elderly and frail woman, and a sort of battle that they had over getting Vera to go to the bathroom in a bedpan. And Stephen King can be distracted by sort of scatological things sometimes. I think he is an underrated writer, but he is not without flaws. And I think in this case, it just goes on for so long. It's like, this doesn't need to be this long of a section. If anything, you could have just touched on it for like a couple of pages and then moved on. I didn't need like an hour of the audiobook to be dedicated to Dolores and Vera having a battle about poop. It's too much. But once you get on the other side of that, once you really get into the flow of the story, like she's not having that back and forth with the other three people in the room, it really does take off. And I enjoyed it. Like I said, it can be a very difficult story because of the trigger warnings. So look into it. I already named them. There could be others, but maybe this isn't a book that you could deal with if those are tough triggers for you. But if you can, it is a great story. And like I said, I think Stephen King is a bit of an underrated writer because a lot of what he does is, quote unquote, commercial. And like I said, he's also not a writer who's without flaws. I think, but by and large, he is at his core a good writer. Not Dolores Claiborne, Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, really phenomenal book. It's an expert novella, I would say. And he has written some clunkers as well. He's also very prolific, and I feel like that's another kind of mark against him in the public eye. And I think a lot of the time, if you are a literary person or like a literary fiction person, you probably, roll your eyes at Stephen King a fair amount. I do think he's a bit underrated, but there are flaws, as with, any writer has some flaws. So, but I do enjoy occasionally reading one of his books. I have not really done anything with his recent output. So I prefer sort of classic Stephen King, but that's just me. And I think Dolores Claiborne is probably as far back as I go in his, but I do want to read 11/22/63. I think I got that title correct someday. It was one of the New York Times best books of the year in which it was published. And I think that is, a lot of people were surprised. A lot of people made fun of it, but I have heard a lot of people say that that's a very good book. It is still a book people talk about years later. So it doesn't feel like they were wrong to do that. Anyway, that was my experience with Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. Now, when I filmed my last Friday Reads video, I had begun The Wilderness by Angela Flournoy, and I was having a difficult time getting through the first chapter, and then I did like an active therapy on myself Thursday night, the night before I filmed my Friday Reads video, where I sort of realized that the reason I was having trouble was because the first chapter of the book deals with a granddaughter taking her grandfather to Paris, knowing that their next stop is going to be Switzerland, where he wants assisted suicide. He is done being in pain and all the suffering that he has experienced. And I am in a weird grief phase for myself right now because Thanksgiving will be the 1-year anniversary of the final decline of our good friend Leon last year. And about a month later, we lost her. So getting close to Thanksgiving this year has stirred up a lot of stuff, a lot of grief, thinking about her. So I mentioned that, and then someone in the comments, and I apologize, I don't remember the name. I should have written it down, but I didn't. someone commented to say that if grief is a thing for me right now, well, grief is a pattern or a theme that sort of recurs throughout the book, The Wilderness. So maybe it wouldn't be the best time for me to read it. And I took that advice to heart. And I thought to myself, all right, I am going to put it down right now. I do really want to get back to it. And I started thinking about what I could do to distract myself, like put myself in a good frame of mind. And I considered a lot of options. And then I did that thing where I pulled like 5 or 6 books off of my bookshelf, sort of went through them, and I narrowed it down to 2. And as I was reshelving the other books, the books that I had passed up, I noticed Under the Mistletoe with You by Lizzie Huxley Jones on my bookshelf. I had apparently just missed it when I went through the shelves the first time around. This is something that was given to me by, I can never remember what her username on Instagram is, or on YouTube is, but on Instagram, she's Armor Cats. She had sent this to me after she went to Gaze the Word in London. So I thought, that actually sounds really perfect for where I'm at right now. We're on the other side of Halloween, and people are putting out Christmas decorations, and stores are really in the Christmas spirit of things. I know that's not everybody's thing, but it is my thing. So why not dive into a queer romance? So that's what I did. And it did fit the brief for what I was looking for and what I needed. I will say it's not a book without its flaws. So the story is, you have Christopher Crowley, I think is his last name, and Nash Nato, 2 alliterative names. Christopher has moved to Wales and opened a bakery. And he is getting used to his new community, his new job. He had left a job and career to go to culinary school to become a baker. And now he's in a new community. He has not lived in Wales before. So he feels like an outsider in this tiny little community. And now he is going to be closing his bakery for the Christmas holiday. And he's supposed to go visit his sister and her girlfriend. Now, this is actually a sequel. Obviously, I will say I don't think you need to have read the first one. I didn't. There are a lot of references to things that happened the previous Christmas that do get a little bit confusing, but I don't think it's necessary. However, there it is right there. I don't know if you can see or if it's blurry. Make You Mine for Christmas was the previous book. So, excuse me. I can't remember why that was important information. So he's alone, but he was, okay, now I remember why it was important information, because he was going to spend Christmas with his sister and his sister's girlfriend, and their story was the previous book, Make You Mine for Christmas. So he decides, since his apartment is going to be empty, his apartment above the bakery is going to be empty, he is going to let it out for the holidays. Sort of like an Airbnb, but it's not an Airbnb. So, unfortunately for Christopher, on the night that he is supposed to close the bakery, and the night before he is supposed to be getting on a train to go to his sister's house, there is a huge snowstorm. So when he wakes up in the morning, there's snow everywhere, there's ice everywhere, roads are closed, trains are down and can't be moving around, so he cannot leave the town where he lives to get to his sister. And that also means he can't leave, even though he has someone coming to stay in his apartment. But he kind of figures maybe they won't come because of this storm, but they show up. And it turns out that the person who has rented the apartment is Nash Nato. So this is Nash, because Nash is described as blonde and shorter. And Nash Nato is they only mention Hallmark once, but his movies actually stream on Netflix in this world. He's a Christmas rom-com star. And Christopher is a huge fan of his movies. He and his local friend Shaz Shaz actually turned him on to Nash Nado's movies, and he's obsessed with them. He watches them over and over again whenever he needs, because his new job starting a bakery has been stressing him out. So he'll watch those movies on a loop. But now Nash Nado has showed up on his doorstep. And one of the things that's a little odd is that immediately, once Christopher gets over the shock of Nash Nado standing in his doorway, he begins to get irritated by Nash. And the reasons are incredibly petty. So it feels like there's the forced proximity trope is here and present. If you're familiar with romantic book tropes, forced proximity is a big one. But enemies to lovers is kind of another one. So I feel like Lizzie Huxley Jones is trying to force that about. But the way they are irritated with each other just feels really petty. And the pettiness can be annoying, especially when later on, as they have a van that can actually drive around town, which becomes important later. And as they're driving, Nash mentions a mailbox, and Christopher rolls his eyes and is like, it's a post box. And it's like, okay, Christopher, he's not British. He calls them a mailbox. It's fine. Just roll with the punches. So it just doesn't make sense how he just immediately becomes incredibly annoyed by Nash. And Nash similarly will get annoyed with Christopher. And I'm trying to remember an example of that. I think there's one where they're in a grocery store and Christopher strikes up a conversation with the clerk, and for some reason this annoys Nash. So he makes petty jokes to annoy Christopher, and it's just like, could you two just be nice to each other a little bit? And of course, as they get to know each other, they start to break through that. And because of the storm and because it goes on for several days, the community in this town where they live, where Christopher lives in Wales, gets together and starts creating action teams to reach out to people and make sure that there aren't people who might need medical attention or help, and that people have the supplies that they need. And Christopher and Nash get really involved in this, and it becomes a way of them finding a sense of community here, especially for Christopher, because he wants to be accepted in this town where he lives. And Nash, of course, is hiding from a problem that he has back in the United States. And I will say his problem is one of those things that could be solved with a single honest conversation, specifically with his agent. But he just does not want to have that conversation, because otherwise he wouldn't have an emotional crisis to get through while he is in Wales. So I've sort of complained about elements of this, like the fact that they bicker back and forth. Where it comes out in the end is that just feels like it's a relationship dynamic that they appreciate. Like, to them, the bickering is part of the fun of their relationship, and they just kind of enjoy annoying each other. It's not what I want in a relationship. It's not how I live my life. But I think there are people who just live like that. Joel and I have some good friends who have been together for about 30 years, and they annoy each other every single day. My mother and my stepfather, her husband, fight all the time. And to a level where it's just kind of like, this life would stress me out, but it seems to be what they want out of a relationship, because they've been together for 30 years. So something is working there. And I think what Nash and Christopher get, the dynamic that they fall into, is not quite that dynamic where people are actually fighting all the time, but it is sort of a variation of that. So ultimately, I would say I did enjoy this book. Especially because it did hit all of the vibes that I needed right now. It was the book that I wanted in this moment. So that was Under the Mistletoe with You. And thank you again to Armor Cats for sending this to me. All right. So once I finished Dolores Claiborne, I took about 24 hours to decide what my next audiobook was going to be. And I don't really know why, but I think after I started Under the Mistletoe with you, I just started thinking, I want something gay. I want something queer, something that's going to be in that vein. And I looked through Libby to see what audiobooks I had just saved on a TBR list that I have. And I noticed Days Without End by Sebastian Barry was available to borrow immediately. So I borrowed it. And I'm barely into it, but it seems pretty good so far. So this is a book I've been wanting to read since I first heard about it. I've never read a Sebastian Barry book, so this will be a good opportunity for me. You have Thomas, and I think his name is John. Yes, Thomas McNulty and John Cole. Thomas had grown up in Ireland and immigrated over to the United States. We haven't really gotten into it, but I believe the description on the back says that he fled the famine in Ireland, or, the forced famine, if you want to be a little more specific. We don't have to get into the politics of it, but anyway, that is what brought him to the United States. He's very young. He's barely 17. He meets John and they begin traveling together, and there's a little bit of backstory about their first job together, which is kind of wild. They are hired by a pub in a town where there's a lot of mining, and there are not a lot of women. So they get hired by the pub because they're 13 and 14, or 12 and 13, possibly even at that point. So they haven't really hit puberty hard. They will wear dresses in the pub, and there's sort of a tacit understanding of what's really going on, but nobody talks about it because the men will just dance with them, and nothing further than that happens. But they do that for about 2 years before they start aging out of that process, and then they end up joining the army. And from the description of the book, and from, well, it actually, I don't think says it on the back of this. So they experienced the horrors of war, first in the Indian Wars and then in the Civil War. And I believe there is a gay angle to it. So, and especially because I think in the sequel, which I forget the name of the sequel, but in the sequel, they have settled down and have a daughter. So, hey, the back of the book treats it like a spoiler, but that's exactly the description of the book that lured me in here. So I can't wait to get further along in the audio. And I'll tell you more about it once I do. Now, print books. I already showed you the 2 books that I got from the library, so it feels like one of these should be next. I feel like my interest would go toward the true story of Raja the Gullible. However, before I picked up Under the Mistletoe with you, I had been leaning toward a graphic novel because I thought graphic novel, that'll be easy. And I have Work Like Any Other, which is adapted from the novel Work Like Any Other by Virginia Reeves, which was, I believe, it was either longlisted or shortlisted for the Booker Prize. I want to say shortlisted. So Alex W. Inker adapted it to graphic novel form in France, and then it was translated by Montana Kane into English and released here. So I had been thinking that I would pick this up, but then once I saw Under the Mistletoe with you on my bookshelf, I pivoted to that. But I've left this book out because what I think I want to do is this weekend just spend some time with this book, because since it's a graphic novel, I should be able to read this very easily and very quickly. So my plan of attack is to read this over the weekend, and as soon as I finish, I will probably dive into the true story of Raja the Gullible and go on from there. And the funny thing about this, so I mentioned earlier, maybe if you skipped to the Friday Reads portion of the video, you didn't hear this part, but I filmed my November book haul revisit, and it's going to be coming on Monday. So all of that had happened before I actually sat down, put together the list of books that I needed to revisit, and filmed the video. So while this book was sitting like right there on my desk, I saw that this is part of my November book haul revisit. So by the time that video posts, I will most likely have read this book. But since I hadn't read it at the time I filmed, I didn't count it as something that I have read. It's just the timing was just wild, just absolutely wild. So that is everything for this Friday Reads video. I'd love to hear what you've been reading, what you've been watching, all of that fun stuff. Let me know in the comment section. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.